All right, everybody. I am here after some technical difficulties and a brief minor emergency where my wonderful compatriot Gina, aka Unwritten Curse, uh, was struck down by a night of cheering for football. But I'm here now, live, only 22 minutes late, along with my new compatriot, Ryan, to go through with you guys and read and talk about Julie, aka Banshee's uh, fantastic story, The Prince and the Pirate. And Gina is going to be chiming in with us as well via the chat box with some questions. And you guys, if you check out the HP at HP Fanfic Talk on Twitter, there should be a link coming out to you from our account. So you can come on in and add questions to the mix as well. So without further ado, the wonderful story of the Prince and the Pirate. A long time ago, on an isle surrounded by sea, there lived a magical prince. No! Be quiet. Tell the story, Daddy. You've heard this one like a million times before. Shh, Daddy, tell the story. A long time ago, on an island surrounded for miles by sea, lived a magical prince at the top of a tower. The prince was a dashing blonde lad known all across the land for the magic his family had. The prince, Scorpius Hyperion Malfoy, was the sole heir to the throne and all the magic of the island. Scorpius practiced magic every day to go stronger and stronger so he'd be able to take over the throne. But magic was coveted by more than just the Malfoys. You see, all across the land, surrounded by the sea, were non-magic folk. Muggles. The royal family was worshipped by muggles, and elves, and goblins, and giants alike. Some sought to steal the magic, while others wanted the Malfoys to share the magic with the rest of the island. But none across all the lands coveted the royal family's magic more than the Potters. Daddy, shh. The Potters were pirates that sought only to steal the Malfoy magic, along with everything else they could get their hands on. They were led by a wise, elderly hero by the name of Harry. The Potters wanted to steal the Malfoy magic and spread it throughout the island. They wanted every creature to be able to hold a wand. Harry captained a ship that sailed around the lands with his two sons, James and Albus, pillaging goods to bring back to the townsfolk. You see, though, where the Potters were known as heroes to the everyday folk, they were dirty pirate scum to people like the Malfoys. If the king and queen had their way, the Potters would be thrown in the dungeon and left to live out their days in solitude. But as all stories go, fate would change that very notion. Dad, she's asleep. Can you tell a different story? Not sleeping. I'm imagining. Fate would change that very notion, and that's just where our story begins. Yay! Shh! Our story begins on the Isle of Hogwarts on the first moon of autumn. But this wasn't any full moon, no sir. The first full moon of autumn marked the young prince's 16th birthday. 15 previous moons Scorpius spent celebrating with feasts aplenty and gifts sent from the entire island. In return, Scorpius and the rest of the royal family would hear stories from the island folk and use their magic to help the sick and hungry. But as fate would have it, the prince wouldn't just get the Malfoy's magic in 12 moons' time. For, you see, Scorpius was bestowed the gift of the royal family's magic with a burden to carry. If Scorpius Hyperion Malfoy didn't wed by his 17th year, the Malfoys would lose their magic forever. Oh no. You've literally heard this story 1,000 times. I don't. What happens to the prince, Daddy? The prince carried this weight on his shoulders with him throughout the years, always in search of the one to take his hand in marriage. His parents presented hopeful contenders over time, but Scorpius never batted an eye to the potential betrothed. For you see, the prince's heart already belonged to another. He spent his days wishing and waiting for the sea to bring home his one true love. But fate needed a story to tell to little boys and girls who couldn't sleep. Fate wouldn't make it easy for Scorpius to hold on to his magic, because as much as he loved the boy that was owned by the sea, the youngest Potter boy detested him equally that. Scorpius liked to blame fate, though it wasn't the burden of the stars. For you see, Albus was a potter and a pirate. A potter went with a Malfoy as well as a pirate did with a bath. But back to the story at hand. At the very end of the feast in Scorpius's name, fate paid a visit to Scorpius. It was a reminder in the wind with a chill down his back, telling him he had 12 more moons to marry his true love. Scorpius walked towards a shadowy corner of the village he was visiting, towards a group of children huddled around a stack of barrels. "Would you look at that?" a familiar voice called out from the shadows. Prince Scorpius could recognize that voice. The cocky, slightly intoxicated inflection he'd fallen in love with anywhere. Captain Harry's youngest son hid behind a barrel of rum, no doubt stealing some on his way. The prince watched as small Muggle children ran away with baskets of stolen goods, given to them by the pirate Albus. "What's the heir of all magic doing out here all alone?" Though his voice shook, the prince stood tall. The first moon of autumn is sacred for the royal family. We're out granting magical favors for the people of the Isle. Even dirty pirate scum should know that much. Laughter echoed from the shadows before the figure stepped out of the shadows. The pirate walked toward the prince, light on his feet as if he glided in his boots. "Dirty pirate scum. At least I'm not tucked away in a castle, hoarding all the magic of the Isle." "What is it, prince? Scared to actually share magic with a low-life swashbuckler like me? Afraid the town would rebel against your prestigious name and outrageous taxation?" Prince Scorpius's hands shook as guilt turned in his stomach. "My family has spent generations guarding magic and using it to help the Isle of Hogwarts thrive. How dare a dirty pirate speak to me as such?" "Your family keeps the magic locked away instead of letting the people help themselves," Albus replied easily. "Meetings in the center of the island to cure the sick and hungry seem a bit pish-posh when the reason people are sick and hungry is the tax your family collects on them." Scorpius wished he was suave and quick with words like the boy in front of him. He also wished he could convince his father to share some of their magic, but he would never tell the pirate that. Instead, he pulled out his wand and pointed it just behind Albus. He watched, and though the pirate's eyes grew wide, Albus stood his ground, dancing on the sword at his side. Fingers dancing on the sword at his side. "What are you going to do, your majesty?" The pirate shot an arrogant smirk toward the prince. "Curse me? Daddy, get to the good part." I am. Prince Scorpius took another step toward the pirate and watched the way Albus gripped the hilt of his sword. "If you pull a sword on me, I'll magic it into a fish," Prince Scorpius warned. The prince heard the pirate's quiet chuckle and waved his wand. muttering one of the ancient spells he studied every day. He watched as a bolt of light flashed past the pirate's head, towards a cart of vegetables. The magic lit up the pirate's already brilliant green eyes until he closed them. Prince Scorpius looked away from the handsome pirate. Where a rickety cart of a few carrots and potatoes sat a second ago, now stood a brand new carriage with a pile of luscious vegetables of every sort. "Don't steal those vegetables, pirate," the prince said. Prince Scorpius watched the pirate's expression spin from worry to surprise and joy. Albus's fingers left the hilt of his sword, and before Prince Scorpius could say another word, the pirate walked over and kissed him. "Oh, so romantic. Papa's home." Really? They were almost asleep. "Keep going. I want to know what happens next." Now, children, the prince was stunned by the pirate's kiss. It was unknown to the pirate the way the prince watched the potter's ship sail off every few days. How if the prince squinted from his tower, he could just make out the bright red flag emblazoned with a lion, signaling the potter's ship sailing away from the Isle of Hogwarts. After a few days at sea, the potters would sail back and bring fish and other stolen goods to the isle. The pirate didn't know how the prince waited by his window every night to make sure the pirate returned home safe. Didn't know how much the prince wished he could stow away in the young pirate's quarters and sail around the world hand in hand with the boy. The pirate didn't know how much the prince loved him. In all fairness to the pirate, though, the pirate had a lot of other things going on, and the prince wasn't exactly vocal about his feelings. Who's telling the story here? Right. Sorry, love. Of course, our story doesn't end with just one kiss. It was a glorious kiss. Albus was calm and confident as he touched his palm to Prince Scorpius's cheek. He pulled away after only a few seconds. Prince Scorpius stared at Albus. He stared at the dopey, cocky smile that the pirate was giving him and forced himself not to smile back. "What did you do that for, pirate?" "It gets so lonely at sea with just my dad and brother. I need something to remember home by when we're gone this year." "You're to be at sea for a year this time?" Prince Scorpius could feel his heart sink in his chest like the anchor of the potter's ship. He couldn't focus on what Albus was saying as words fell from his mouth. Something about his father's quest to find magical items? Scorpius didn't understand, and he had to act. "Take me with you." To say the least, the pirate was surprised right back. He quickly narrowed his eyes at the prince and laughed. "Is that some kind of joke? I don't want to be arrested and hung for kidnapping the heir of magic." "I don't want to be the heir of magic." Scorpius felt like a weight was lifted from his shoulders as he said the words aloud. "I don't want to keep the magic away from the Isle anymore. My family doesn't need all that magic to run a kingdom." The pirate stared at the prince for a moment, crossing his arms. "My father will put you to work. You won't have servants. Your shoes will never be dry." Prince Scorpius looked down to his feet. "I don't care about dry shoes. I can use my magic for something good for once and help your father find his buried treasure." The pirate laughed. "My father isn't looking for buried treasure. You've heard too many fairy tales. We're looking for—" Albus leaned in and whispered, "Horcruxes." He grinned madly, in the way only a pirate can. "Surely magic would help your father," Scorpius said, crossing his arms over his chest. The prince watched the pirate's expression change as he thought. "We're leaving tonight." He looked out to the water to where the sun was nearing the ocean's horizon. "You can't go back to the castle, and you can't say goodbye." Prince Scorpius stood his ground. "You have me. Now take me with you, pirate." "Oh, come on, finish the story." "They're asleep. I'll wake them back up." "You wouldn't dare." "Tell me the dirty version, then. What happens the first night in Albus's chambers? Does Scorpius love Albus's booty, Oh my God, I want a divorce. Oh, finish the story, Prince Scorpius. Please. As brave as Scorpius felt following Albus to the docks, as fearless as it felt to drop his emerald robes on the wooden planks leading up to the SS Ginevra, and shake Captain Potter's hand, he still had a heavy heart as he stepped onto the ship and watched his home disappear behind the horizon. By way of carrier pigeon, Scorpius was able to let his mother know he was safe. She was sad, and his father was furious. But every day that Scorpius got to wake up next to Albus was worth every angry letter from the king. Full moons and one day later, Captain Potter performed a marriage ritual for the prince and the pirate. The day after, Scorpius woke for the first time in 17 years and felt alive. His father never explained what losing some of the magic built up inside would feel like. He felt like he could breathe again, and it was all thanks to Albus. In the days that followed, Captain Potter brought the ship back to the Isle of Hogwarts. His wife sent word that she'd given birth to a girl 3 moons prior, to be called Lily. Prince Scorpius visited his mom in the streets, in front of the castle, introduced her to Albus, and took back to the sea with Albus the next night. The days passed, and every day he woke, he could feel less of his family's magic. He knew it was being spread through the Isle of Hogwarts, and soon enough, everyone would be able to do the things he could do. Even aboard the ship, he watched as Albus practiced turning the sails with a wand. Scorpius knew he didn't need to keep all of the magic of the island anymore, because what he had with Albus was magic enough for him. So they lived at sea, the prince and the pirate, happily ever after. I like being the pirate better. Prince Potter is so cliche. Shh, he'll wake them. They were wild today. It was like having a pair of pirates storming the yard. Tell me all about it, Prince Scorpius. Can't believe I married dirty pirate scum. I'm glad Prince Scorpius shared his magic with the island and married the dirty pirate scum so they could live happily ever after in a quiet suburb in Wales. Me too, pirate. And as is most appropriate for what's almost just a fairy tale, we will close with a dramatic "the end." So, as we were saying before, that was The Prince and the Pirate, for those of you who are just joining us, written by one of our members here at hpfanfictalk.com, aka HPFT, Julie, aka Banshee, wrote The Prince and the Pirate for a challenge that was actually hosted on the HPFT forums for Muggle Maybe, aka Renee's Happy and Gay Challenge, which was hosted independently, but sort of in conjunction with, at least in time, the site's Pride Month celebration. And so now I think, hopefully, we have the author, Julie, with us, who is going to be able to answer some questions right now about the story that you may have. So if you have the link, which you should have from Twitter by now, I know the site tweeted it out, please, please, please go ahead and send out questions to our group chat or questions to the hpfanfictalk.com account on Twitter, so that we can have Julie answer those questions as part of Fic Night number 4. As is sort of the tradition, while we wait for some of those questions to come in, I sadly alone this time, but I'll sort of talk about what I liked about the story, and then hopefully by the time that's done, then we'll have plenty of questions from you guys, and if not, then I will have questions that Jean and I came up with to ask Julie, and hopefully we'll get her answers to those very soon. So, as far as this story goes, I think my favorite thing about it was so unique in that it was sort of a story within a story, and in that sense, um, we got to see a lot of different things. We got to sort of peek behind the curtain and see, to an extent, what has Albus and Scorpius's life, which Scorpius being such a popular ship, is always interesting for people to see. But what is their life sort of like together? And obviously, they've got children at home who they're trying to get put down for sleep. And Scorpius obviously working very hard on that. And what's interesting to me about the children too is that they seem to have definitely different personalities. One of whom is obviously interested sort of in the romance of the tale and maybe even just the fantasy of the tale. But one of which is very much tired of hearing the same story of his parents' romance again. I think it's his parents, if I'm reading the story right. We'll get confirmation of that later from Julie directly, or she can tell me, Kevin, you read it totally wrong. It was not a son and a daughter. And I can go ahead and retract that comment. But so we get that. And then, of course, when Albus comes home, we get a little insight into the dynamic of the actual relationship as it is now, which there's, I think, obviously the sort of fairy tale that's being told to the children is a kind of a amusing allusion to some of the dynamics that we see there, particularly the contrasts in their personalities. And differences in background, which are obviously pronounced and always sort of a critical component of any of the next gen stories that put either Scorpius and Albus together, Scorpius and Rose, Scorpius and Lily, with the drama of the Malfoy family and the Potter or Weasley family, dealing with the fact that their children are now in love and ending up in this situation, living their life together, having kids together, and raising a family together, despite the fact that all throughout their, at the very least, their childhood and adolescent lives, just sort of totally despising each other. So that's always an interesting dynamic to see. And we got to see a lot of that here. As far as the writing goes, I thought one of the things that Julie did best was really use, despite it realistically all being dialogue, really use descriptions and really choose the words and the images that really evoke this sort of fairy tale idea. And all throughout the story as you're reading it, because of those descriptions, those careful word choices, and kind of layering in this mythology about magic and it being spread around, and really being able to see that as readers of obviously the series as a whole, of a sort of parallel, which fairy tales, of course, often are metaphors for more serious matters, but seeing that metaphor in there, that's also present when we're talking about pure blood supremacy that connoted the Malfoy family and trying to sort of keep magic, if not directly to themselves, to sort of the people that they saw fit, contrasted with exactly how they saw people like the Potters, blood traders and all that jazz. as trying to sort of steal that magic and let the unworthy have it. But throughout that, we don't just get that metaphor. We don't just get the romance between Albus and Scorpius. We also get this great feel for a true fairy tale story. And with that, I am going to go to our questions for Julie and hopefully have some answers for you here in just a second. And so the first question that we're going to answer is one we try to get an answer to, obviously, for each and every question. And we know the challenge obviously comes into what the answer ends up being. But the first question we have is, we've asked Julie, how on earth did you come up with the idea for The Prince and the Pirate as such a unique entry and such a unique response to this challenge? How did you decide we're going to make this kind of a wild AU fairy tale, if you will? And so we have the first answer to that question, and it is in essence sort of the answer that, if you've read the story, you've seen a lot of it in the author's note. But one of our former HPFT staffers, Audrey, aka Akusa, posted a status that resonated with Julie as a Scorbus or Scorpius Albus fan, talking about how Scorbu, I'm probably completely butchering that, so I apologize to anybody who knows French, but how Scorbu in French is the word scurvy. And so Julie had come back with a comment about pirate Scorbus as a possible idea for a story. And then there was a lot of feedback. Said some cheerleading from other HPFT members on Twitter. That's how the idea actually came to fruition. And so the second question that we have is, what about the sort of mythology that I talked about that was created within the story, with this idea that they're in this alternate place, that they're on the Isle of Hogwarts, and if I'm reading it right, what about that idea and how it came into play. And so the answer to that is Julie says she took a little bit of inspiration from the Robin Hood story, with the concept of Albus's character, and the Potter family, obviously also as well, being pirates, but the concept of, rather than sort of enriching themselves, stealing from the rich, the Malfoys, and Prince Scorpius and the royal family, there in the Isle of Hogwarts, and feeding the poor. Um, did not look into too much sort of beyond that inspiration. But I think we could all agree that I think it came across, particularly if you've already read the story, very strongly throughout. And I don't know that there was really anything needed, um, more than looking into things like that. But it's always cool to have the background of where the story came from, and so it clearly took inspiration from that, as Julie's told us, but also, just from various stories, as we writers and other authors are wont to do. Stories, whether on books or in film, that we've kind of seen, and also draw inspiration from how to craft those kind of stories. And so that's where kind of this background, this scene, this setting, and the dynamics of prince and pirate, and how they came to be, a union together, I guess, if you will, with these two star-crossed lovers from the Potter and Malfoy clans. The next question that we have is, was there an intent for there to be a story behind the story, like fairy tales, which are not just about the romance or the direct plot, but issues at play, like family background, lingering blood supremacy, things like that played into the AU? And so we have the answer to the story behind the story, which is, as we sort of talked about in our synopsis, Scorpius telling the story to his kids. So when Albus gets home and interrupts, getting to see that theme that we talked about, and how it plays into their actual lives, the ideas of what came between them, and the idea that Scorpius had feelings for Albus, but had those feelings from afar, with Albus sort of being that character in romantic stories, where I guess he's sort of the ignorant party, if you will, or he's got so much going on. Literally, as it says in one of Albus's lines in the story, had a lot going on, didn't notice. Or you can read it as playing into that background that they came from different families that had a big, definitely not so positive history together, which also shows through in a bit of the Potter-Malfoy feud, where the Malfoys are purebloods and they think they're better than the magical creatures of the village, and the other individuals that the Potters are trying to help, whereas the Potters are sort of out there trying to help everyone. The next question that we had for Julie is one of the sort of old standbys. What was your favorite part about the story? And so the favorite part, as you might have imagined, if you know or have talked to our wonderful banshee, um, Julie's favorite part was getting to include the booty choke, which started out as part of what she's described as a grand plan to include as many puns as possible. And ended up being, in the context of everything that she wrote, a plan to be satisfied or happy, as long as one of those many puns ended up making it into the story. Close second that was also thrown in was really enjoying the ending, which was actually how the story started, which is a nice revelation to always have. I know I personally always am in some ways in awe, in some ways envious of those folks who can write stories non-linearly, where they start somewhere else, and actually write to getting there, or write to the before and after of that scene earlier, which is interesting. And of course, she also liked the family dynamic with the little interruptions from the kids and Albus, and how she was able to use this concept of the bedtime story, also to provide that character of what the family's like, provide that character of how Albus and Scorpius, how, despite everything, whatever they've been through, done through, they are just at their core this, as she describes them, super dorky suburban couple. Another question that we got was, do you ship Scorpius, or was it a challenge to write the pairing? Says absolutely, definitely ship Scorpius. It was for the Happy and Gay Challenge, like we said, hosted by Muggle Maybe back during Pride Month. And Julie actually picked the pairing based off of the scorbut, scurvy, French connection, to throw out, I guess, as many references as we can in that sentence. French connection that she had discovered talking with Audrey, aka Akusa, and then wanting to write that idea. And it looks like the last question that we have right now is there anything that you would like the people, readers of the story, to know about the story that's not necessarily in its text, or behind the scenes tidbits about it coming together? My lazy co-host has finally come back, as we're getting the answer to this last question from Julie. And he's getting his groove on here, looks like. Apparently, in keeping with The Prince and the Pirate, I've been delivered an impromptu treasure map by my co-host. So there you go. Perhaps this is the path they took on the hunt for the Horcruxes. Who can be sure? But as far as additional tidbits to share about, Julie said the original idea for this story that was talked about on Twitter actually involved Albus and Scorpius having a pirate date. I am taking from that a pirate themed date, perhaps, and then fighting the giant squid on the lake at Hogwarts. That I would probably, we're not allowed to pay money for fan fiction to read, but I might pay money to read Albus and Scorpius dressing up like pirates fighting the giant squid. But obviously she says, unfortunately, that didn't happen, but still thinks it's an adorable idea. Any chance we see that one day, Julie? And I am told with an element of surprise, maybe, but an exclamation point, maybe. Muggle, maybe the host of the challenge, Renee, is apparently bribing Julie with caribou to make that happen. Caribou, or maybe caribou coffee, who can be sure, from the author of The Prince and the Pirate. But that's the last question that we have. We hope you guys enjoyed reading The Prince and the Pirate, hearing directly answers from Julie about the story, about how it came to be, about what we can take away from it. And as always, we will post a thread after we sign off here on hpfanfictalk.com in the Fic Night section, where you guys can ask additional questions, have additional discussion about the story, about the cast. And of course, you will be able to access this video if you missed it first time around on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, HP Fanfic Talk. Just head over there, check on the live stream section of our channel, and you'll be able to play back this and any of our other 3 previous Fic Night discussions at your leisure. Beauty of the internet, beauty of the cloud. But Julie and everyone who's been with us today, apologies for the technical difficulties. Understand some people got the wrong link out on Twitter, but I hope you'll be able to find this later. We'll tweet out the correct link, as well as get that discussion up ASAP. And we're glad those of you that were with us were with us. We appreciate Julie really taking her time to answer all these questions that have come in, and for writing such an exceptional story. And until Fic Night number 5, this is Kevin, aka Tidal Dragon, and Julie, aka Banshee, signing off. Have a great Sunday, everybody.